Emma sat quietly in the corner of Manchester Airport, clutching her worn portfolio bag with trembling fingers. The leather was cracked and faded from years of use. But it held everything that mattered to her: 3 years of carefully saved designs, and her one chance at a better life. At 26, she had worked countless late nights at her small graphic design jobs, choosing instant noodles over proper meals. Walking instead of taking the bus, all to save enough money for the single trip to London. Her phone buzzed in her hand as she checked the time again. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock sharp, she would sit across from the hiring manager at Morrison Creative, one of London's most respected design firms. This interview could change everything. No more sharing a cramped flat with two roommates who left dirty dishes in the sink. No more counting coins to afford her monthly travel card. No more wondering if her dreams were just foolish fantasies. Emma's mother had called that morning, her voice heavy with doubt. "Are you sure about this, love? Your cousin Linda just got a nice steady job at the local bank. Good benefits, regular hours. Maybe it's time to be practical." But Emma had hung up with determination burning in her chest. She would prove that her art mattered, that her years of struggle had been worth something. Across the busy terminal, James Mitchell rushed through the crowd of travelers, his camera bag bouncing rhythmically against his hip. At 30 years old, the photographer from Liverpool had learned that life could change in an instant. 6 months ago, he had been the youngest staff photographer at the Liverpool Echo, covering local events and building what he thought was a secure career. Then budget cuts it, and suddenly he found himself unemployed, watching his savings disappear. While he sent out countless applications that went unanswered, this assignment in Scotland was different though. A small magazine wanted him to document a community in the Highlands that was rebuilding after their main factory closed down. It was not glamorous work, and the pay was modest. But it was his chance to prove he could create meaningful stories. With his camera, James had spent his last £100 on train tickets and equipment repairs. If this assignment went well, other opportunities might follow. If it failed, he would have to consider his brother's offer to work at the shipping company, a steady job that would mean giving up photography forever. The terminal buzzed with the usual airport energy. Families hugged goodbye. Business travelers typed urgently on their phones, and children pressed their faces against the large windows to watch planes take off. Emma stood up, checking her boarding pass one more time. Gate 12. Her heart raced as she gathered her courage and started walking toward what she hoped would be the beginning of her new life. James glanced at his watch and quickened his pace. His flight to Edinburgh was boarding soon, and he could not afford to miss it. He adjusted his camera bag and dodged round a family with luggage, his mind already imagining the stories he would capture in the Scottish community. Neither Emma nor James saw each other coming. The collision happened near the small coffee shop between gates 10 and 15. Emma, focused on her boarding pass and lost in nervous thoughts about tomorrow's interview, walked directly into James as he hurried round the corner. The impact sent her portfolio bag flying, its contents scattering across the polished airport floor like fallen leaves. James's camera bag burst open, spilling memory cards, lens caps, and charging cables in every direction. But the worst part was the tea. James had been carrying a large cup of hot English breakfast tea, and it exploded on impact, sending brown liquid splashing across Emma's carefully organized portfolio. Her printed resume, the one she had reprinted 5 times to get the colors just right, became a soggy mess. Her design samples, protected in plastic sleeves, dripped with tea. No, 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 Emma cried, dropping to her knees and frantically trying to salvage her work. 3 years of preparation was dissolving before her eyes. "I am so sorry." James knelt beside her, His face red with embarrassment. He grabbed tissues from his bag and tried to help. But the damage was already done. I was not watching where I was going. Please. Let me help fix this somehow. As they scrambled to collect their belongings, both looked up at the departure boards. Emma's flight to London showed gate closed in red letters. James's flight to Edinburgh displayed the same heartbreaking message. They had missed their planes. By mere minutes, Emma sank into a nearby plastic chair, tears filling her eyes. The carefully controlled composure she had maintained for months finally cracked. That was my only chance. She whispered, her voice barely audible above the airport. Noise, I cannot afford another ticket. I have been saving for 3 years just for this one opportunity. James sat heavily in the chair beside her, his own world crumbling. Mine too, he said quietly. I just spoke to the airline desk. They say the next available flights are not for 3 days because of the air traffic controller strikes. Round them, the airport continued its busy rhythm. But for Emma and James, time seemed to stop. Two strangers, bound together by misfortune and spilled tea, had no idea that missing their flights would become the most important moment of their lives. The budget hotel room was barely large enough for one person, let alone to strangers who had just met under the worst possible circumstances. Emma sat on the edge of the narrow single bed, holding her damaged portfolio in her lap like a wounded bird. The tea stains had dried into ugly brown patches across her resume, and several of her best designed samples were completely ruined. James looked uncomfortable as he tried to range himself in the small wooden chair by the window. His long legs did not fit properly, and the chair creaked every time he moved. Please, take the bed, Emma had offered when they first arrived, but James had refused. I am the one who caused this mess, he had said firmly. The least I can do is let you sleep. Properly, they had pooled their remaining money to afford this room for 2 nights. Emma had £43 left after buying her original plane ticket. James had £51, which was supposed to last him the entire week in Scotland. Together, it was just enough for the cheapest accommodation they could find near the airport. The silence stretched between them as the reality of their situation settled in. Emma's interview was happening right now, hundreds of miles away in London. Without her, someone else would get the job she had dreamed about for years. James's assignment in Scotland would go to another photographer, and the magazine would probably never consider him for future work. I have been planning this interview for months, Emma said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. She held up a tea-stained page that had once displayed her favorite logo design. Every detail was perfect. I researched the company for weeks, practiced my presentation over and over. My family thinks I'm wasting my time with art. They want me to get a real job at the factory like everyone else in our town. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Stop chasing silly dreams, Emma. Art does not pay the bills. Your father worked at that factory for 30 years and provided for our family. There is no shame in honest work, but Emma had always felt there was more to life than the grey factory walls and the smell of industrial chemicals. James shifted in his uncomfortable chair, understanding her pain completely. I know what that is like, he said, staring out the small window at the grey sky. After I lost my newspaper job, everyone kept asking when I would give up photography and do something practical. My brother offers me work at his shipping company every week. Good money, he says, steady hours, but I cannot imagine spending my life in an office, never creating anything beautiful again. The weight of their shared disappointment filled the small room. Outside, they could hear the distant sound of airplanes taking off, carrying other people toward their dreams, while Emma and James sat stranded and uncertain about their futures. The next morning brought grey clouds and a light rain that matched their mood perfectly. Emma's portfolio was slightly less damp, but still unusable. James's camera equipment had survived the tea incident, but without a job to go to, it felt pointless to carry it round. They walked through the nearby town with no particular destination in mind. The streets were quiet, lined with small shops and modest houses. It was the kind of place where everyone knew their neighbors, where life moved at a slower pace than the big cities where Emma and James had been chasing there. Emma pulled her thin jacket tighter against the cool air. She had packed for a quick trip to London, not for wandering round strange towns in the rain. James walked beside her, equally lost in his own thoughts, when something caught his attention. There, attached to a lamp post with clear tape, was a handwritten sign on bright yellow paper. The letters were uneven, obviously written by hand in black marker. Art classes for local children. Volunteers needed. Community Centre. Mill Street. All welcome. Look at that, James said, pointing to the sign. Emma followed his gaze and felt something stir in her chest for the first time since the airport disaster. They found the community centre easily. A small brick building wedged between a bakery and a used bookshop. The paint on the front door was chipped and the windows needed cleaning, but warm light glowed from inside. Through the glass, they could see movement and hear the faint sound of children's voices. Emma hesitated at the door. Maybe we should not bother them. We are not real teachers. But James was already pushing the door open. Sometimes the best teachers are the ones who remember what it feels like to struggle, he said softly. Inside, they met Mrs. Helen Davies, a woman in her early 60s with kind eyes and paint-stained fingers. Her grey hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a colourful apron covered in handprints from countless children. "Hello, dears," she said warmly, setting down a stack of construction paper. "Are you here about the volunteer position? We can always use more hands." Mrs. Davies led them through the small building, showing them the main classroom where a dozen children between the ages of 6 and 12 sat round low tables, working intently on various art projects. The supplies were basic: broken crayons, slightly dried markers, construction paper that had seen better days. But the children's enthusiasm was infectious. "We do not have much," Mrs. Davies explained, her voice filled with gentle pride. "The council gives us a small budget, and we raise what we can through bake sales and car boot sales. But these children have such wonderful imaginations. They just need someone to believe in them and show them that their creativity matters." Emma watched a 7-year-old boy named Tom carefully drawing with a broken red crayon, his tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. He was creating a picture of what looked like a superhero, complete with a cape and a big smile. The drawing was wonky and childish, but there was something pure and joyful about it that made Emma's heart ache with recognition. "I could help teach them some basic design," Emma offered quietly, surprising herself with the words. "If you would like, I am not a real teacher, but I know about colors and shapes and making things look nice." James raised his camera instinctively, then lowered it again. "And I could document their artwork," he said. "Show people what they are creating here. Help them feel proud of their work." Mrs. Davies smiled, and her whole face lit up with genuine warmth. "That would be wonderful," she said. "These children rarely get visitors who see their potential instead of their problems." For the first time since missing their flights, Emma and James felt something other than disappointment. It was small at first, like a tiny flame in a dark room, but it was real. They had found something unexpected, a place where they might actually be needed. Emma walked quietly around the classroom, watching the children work on their art projects. The room smelled of paint and glue, mixed with the faint scent of the sandwiches Mrs. Davies had provided for lunch. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, creating patches of warmth on the worn wooden floor where some children sat cross-legged, completely absorbed in their creations. In the far corner, away from the cheerful chatter of the other children, sat Lucy. She was 8 years old, with sandy brown hair that fell across her face as she leaned over her painting, while the other children worked in groups, sharing supplies and giggling together. Lucy painted alone, her small fingers gripping a thin brush with intense concentration. Emma approached slowly. Not wanting to startle the quiet girl, she knelt down beside Lucy's small table. Bringing herself to the child's level, the painting before her took Emma's breath away. Lucy had created a garden scene bursting with flowers in every color imaginable: bright red roses, sunny yellow daisies, purple violets, and orange marigolds that seemed to dance across the paper. "That is beautiful," Emma said softly, genuinely amazed by the child's natural sense of color and composition. "Tell me about your painting." Lucy looked up, her eyes wide with surprise that someone was actually interested in her work. For a moment, she seemed too shy to speak, but then her face brightened like sunrise breaking through clouds. "These are the flowers I want to plant in our garden someday," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom says we cannot afford seeds, but I like to imagine them anyway. I pretend I can smell them when I paint." Emma felt something crack open inside her chest, a mixture of heartbreak and healing that caught her completely off guard. Here was this little girl, dreaming of something as simple as flower seeds, creating beauty from pure imagination because the real thing was beyond her reach. It reminded Emma of her own childhood, drawing pictures of the art studio she dreamed of having someday, when her family could barely afford her school supplies. "Would you like me to show you how to make your flowers look even more real?" Emma asked gently. "I know some tricks that might help." Lucy nodded eagerly, scooting over to make room for Emma beside her tiny chair. Emma pulled up a second chair and began showing Lucy how to mix colors on her palette, how to create different shades of green for stems and leaves, how to add small touches of white paint to make flowers look like they were catching sunlight. As the afternoon progressed, Emma moved from child to child, sharing simple techniques that transformed their artwork. She showed 9-year-old Sarah how to blend colors to create a sunset sky. She helped 12-year-old David understand how shadows could make his drawings of cars look three-dimensional. With each small lesson, Emma watched the children's confidence grow, their faces lighting up as they mastered new skills. The joy was contagious. Soon, children were calling out across the room to share their discoveries. "Look, Miss Emma, I made purple by mixing red and blue. Can you show me how to make my dog's fur look fluffy? I want to learn how to draw like Lucy's." Flowers across the room. James moved quietly with his camera, but not in the way he usually worked. Instead of setting up formal shots or directing people to pose, he simply observed and captured the genuine moments unfolding naturally around him through his lens. He saw 8-year-old Michael's face scrunched in concentration as he painted, careful strokes on his canvas, completely lost in his creative world. He photographed the exact moment when Lucy's face broke into a huge smile as she successfully mixed the perfect shade of pink for roses. He captured the way 10-year-old Oliver spontaneously helped 6-year-old Emma reach the pink brushes on the high shelf, both children completely unaware they were being photographed. These were not the dramatic landscapes James had always dreamed of shooting, or the important news events he thought would make his career. These were simple moments of childhood wonder and creativity, but something about them felt more real and meaningful than anything he had ever captured before. During their lunch break, Emma and James sat on a bench outside the community centre, sharing a bag of sandwiches Mrs. Davies had insisted they take. The children played in the small courtyard, their laughter echoing off the brick walls, you know, James said, watching Lucy show her flower painting to another girl. I think I have been chasing the wrong kind of success my whole career. I always thought I needed to photograph important events or famous places to matter as a photographer. But this, he gestured toward the children, toward the simple joy radiating from their play. This feels more important than anything I have ever captured. Emma nodded, understanding completely. A warm feeling had been growing in her chest all day. Something she had never experienced in all her years of creating designs for a corporate clients or preparing portfolios for prestigious firms. I spent so much time trying to impress that London company, she said quietly, trying to prove I was good enough for their fancy office. But seeing Tom's confidence grow when I praised his superhero drawing, watching Lucy's face when she learned to mix colors, I have never felt so useful in my entire life. That evening, as the children finished their projects and began cleaning up, Mrs. Davies invited Emma and James to her small office for a tea. The room was cramped but cozy, filled with children's artwork from previous years and photographs of smiling faces. You two have given these children something precious today, Mrs. Davies said, her eyes bright with gratitude as she poured steaming tea into mismatched cups. You have shown them that their creativity matters, that what they create has value. But more than that, you have shown them that they matter. Some of these children go home to parents who are too tired from working multiple jobs to notice their artwork. You made them feel seen. As Emma and James walked back to their budget hotel that night, the streets seemed different somehow. The grey buildings looked less depressing. The distant sound of traffic less harsh. Something fundamental had shifted inside both of them during those hours in the community centre. The bitter disappointment of their missed opportunities was still there, but it was being slowly replaced by something warmer and deeper, a sense of belonging and purpose. They had never expected to find in this small town, in this humble community centre, with these children who had so little but gave so much joy. The morning of their final day at the community centre started like any other, with Emma and James arriving early to help Mrs. Davies set up the classroom. The children had been working all week on special projects for what they called their family art show, a small exhibition where parents, siblings, and neighbors could come see what they had created. Emma was helping Lucy put the finishing touches on her flower garden painting when her phone rang. The number on the screen made her heart stop. It was Morrison Creative, the London design firm. With trembling fingers, she stepped outside into the courtyard to answer. Miss Thompson. This is Sarah Williams from Morrison Creative. I know your interview was supposed to be earlier this week, but we heard about the airline strikes. Would you be available for a video interview this evening at 7 o'clock? We have had some changes in our schedule, and this would be your last opportunity to be considered for the position. Emma's mouth went dry. This was it, the second chance she had never expected to get. The job she had dreamed about for 3 years was still within reach. Yes, she heard herself saying, yes, I can do that. 7 o'clock tonight. Excellent. We will send you the video conference details within the hour. We are very much looking forward to meeting you. Miss Thompson, this is a wonderful opportunity. Emma hung up the phone and stared at the small screen, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears, inside the community centre. She could hear the children's excited voices as they prepared for their exhibition. But suddenly those sounds seemed to come from very far away. 20 minutes later, James received his own life-changing phone call. He was in the middle of helping Michael frame his car painting when his phone buzzed with a text message from the Scottish magazine editor. Can you still make it to the Highlands? Another photographer cancelled. Flight tonight at 11 p.m. from Manchester. This is your last chance. James read the message 3 times, his stomach churning with a mixture of excitement and dread. This was exactly what he had been hoping for when he missed his original flight. The magazine job could restart his career, lead to other assignments, prove to everyone, including himself, that he had not wasted years chasing an impossible dream. But there was a problem that neither Emma nor James had anticipated when they first walked into this community center 3 days ago. The children's art exhibition was scheduled for tonight at 7 o'clock, exactly the same time as Emma's video interview. The families had been invited, refreshments had been prepared, and most importantly, the children had been counting down the days with pure excitement. For many of these kids, it would be the first time anyone had ever displayed their artwork like it was something valuable and worth celebrating. Emma found James in the corner of the room, staring at his phone with a conflicted expression. "Did you get good news too?" she asked quietly, though she could tell from his face that the news was complicated. "A magazine in Scotland can still use me if I catch the 11 o'clock flight tonight," James said, his voice heavy with uncertainty. "It is exactly the kind of assignment I have been hoping for." Emma sat down heavily in one of the small chairs. "Morrison Creative wants to interview me by video at 7 tonight. Same time at the art show." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the children work around them. Tom was carefully writing his name on a small card to place next to his painting. Lucy was practicing how she would introduce her flower garden to her mother. Sarah was organizing the paint brushes so everything would look perfect for the visitors. "What should I do?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "This interview could change my whole life. I might never get another chance like this." James understood her struggle completely because he was facing the exact same impossible choice. "I do not know," he admitted. "This magazine job could get my career back on track. But leaving tonight means missing their big moment, and after everything we have shared this week." Before either of them could finish the thought, young Tom came running over, his 7-year-old face glowing with excitement. Miss Emma, will you really be here tonight to see my painting of my dog Buster? I worked extra hard to make the fur look real, just like you taught me. I made it extra special just for you." Behind Tom, Lucy approached more shyly, tugging gently on James's shirt. "Mr. James, will you take a picture of me with my flower painting tonight? I want to show my mum how proud you made me feel. She works 2 jobs, but she promised to come see my flowers." 8-year-old Michael joined them, carrying his carefully framed car painting. "I told my dad you taught me how to make shadows, Miss Emma. He said he wants to meet you and thank you for helping me." One by one, the other children gathered round Emma and James, chattering excitedly about the evening's exhibition. Their faces were bright with anticipation, their voices full of joy and pride. These were children who had very little. Most came from families struggling to pay rent, buy groceries, or keep the lights on. But for this one evening, they would feel like real artists whose work mattered. Emma looked at James, and in that moment, both of them understood what they had discovered over the past 3 days. These children had given them something more valuable than any job or career opportunity. They had reminded them why they had fallen in love with art and photography in the first place, not for fame or money or professional recognition, but for the pure joy of creating something beautiful and sharing it with others. Emma reached into her purse and powered off her phone, cutting the connection to London and the life she had planned. "Some opportunities are worth more than others," she said quietly, her voice steady and certain. James looked at his camera bag, packed and ready for Scotland. then at the excited faces surrounding them. He had spent months chasing assignments that would advance his career, but he had found his most important story right here in this simple community center. "The most important story I can tell is happening right here," he said. And packing his equipment, they had chosen love over ambition, connection over career, and in that moment, neither of them had ever felt more certain about anything in their lives. The art exhibition that evening transformed the simple community center into something magical. Mrs. Davies had strung up fairy lights borrowed from her own garden, and the children's artwork hung on every available wall space, each piece carefully mounted on colorful paper and labeled with the young artist's name in neat handwriting. Parents began arriving at 7 o'clock sharp, many still wearing their work clothes after long shifts at factories, shops, and offices round town. Some mothers came with babies on their hips, and fathers arrived with paint-stained hands from their own jobs. But every face showed the same expression of wonder as they saw their children's creations, displayed like treasures in a real gallery. Emma stood near Tom's dog painting, watching as his mother approached the artwork with tears already forming in her eyes. The woman was young, probably not much older than Emma herself, wearing a nurse's uniform with tired eyes that suddenly came alive when she saw her son's creation. "He talks about you every day," Tom's mother said to Emma, her voice thick with emotion. "Every evening when I come home from my shift at the hospital, he tells me what Miss Emma taught him about colors and shapes. You have made him believe he is a real artist. I have never seen him so proud of anything in his whole life." Tom appeared at his mother's side, practically bouncing with excitement. "Mom, do you see how I made Buster's fur look real? Miss Emma showed me how to use different shades of brown and add little white spots for the light. And look, I painted his collar red because that is his favorite color." Emma watched the interaction with a warmth spreading through her chest that was completely different from any satisfaction she had ever felt from her professional design work. This was not about impressing clients or winning awards. This was about a 7-year-old boy who now believed his creativity mattered, who ran home every day eager to show his tired mother what he had learned. Across the room, James moved quietly through the crowd with his camera, but his approach was completely different from any assignment he had ever worked on before. He was not trying to capture dramatic moments or create artistic compositions. Instead, he was preserving memories, the exact expression on Lucy's face as she posed proudly next to her flower garden painting, her small hand resting gently on the frame while her mother knelt beside her, both of them beaming with joy. James photographed Sarah's grandfather examining a sunset painting with the intensity of an art critic, nodding seriously as the 8-year-old explained her color choices. He captured the moment when Michael's father lifted his son onto his shoulders so everyone could see the car painting that had taken a week to complete. These were not the kind of photographs that would win journalism awards or launch a prestigious career, but James knew with absolute certainty that these images would mean more to him than any professional recognition he might have achieved. He was documenting something precious, the moment when children realized their creativity had value, when families came together to celebrate imagination and hard work. As the evening progressed, Emma found herself in conversation after conversation with parents who thanked her for believing in their children. James met grandparents who had never seen their grandchildren so confident, siblings who were inspired to try art themselves. The impact of their 3 days at the community center was rippling outward in ways they had never expected. 3 months later, Emma and James had built something beautiful together from the foundation of that unexpected week. Emma had used her savings not for another trip to London, but to start a small design business that specialized in helping local community organizations. She created colorful flyers for the food bank, designed a website for the after-school program, developed materials that helped small charities communicate their missions more effectively. James had found his calling in documenting these grassroots programs, telling the stories of people who were quietly making their communities better. His photographs appeared in local newspapers and community newsletters, inspiring others to volunteer and get involved. The work paid modestly, but it paid enough, and more importantly, it filled both of them with a sense of purpose they had never experienced in their previous careers. Mrs. Davies had become like a second mother to both of them, offering advice and encouragement as they built their new lives. She watched Emma teach art classes twice a week to growing groups of children, and smiled as James showed the kids how to see the world through a photographer's eyes, teaching them to notice beauty in everyday moments. Mrs. Davies told them one afternoon as they cleaned up after a particularly successful art session, sometimes the best destinations are the ones you never plan to reach. You two were meant to be here, with these children, doing this work. I have never seen anything more clear in my life. Emma and James had indeed found something more valuable than any job or career opportunity they had originally chased. They had discovered their true purpose, a community that needed them, and along the way, they had found each other. Their relationship had grown naturally from shared values and common goals, built on the solid foundation of meaningful work and genuine care for others. 6 months after that fateful collision at Manchester Airport, Emma and James found themselves back in the same terminal, but everything had changed. This time, they were not rushing to catch flights to pursue distant dreams in London or Scotland. Instead, they were waiting at the arrival's gate to pick up Emma's younger sister Rachel, who had decided to leave her corporate job in Birmingham to join their growing community program. As they stood together watching planes take off through the large windows, Emma slipped her hand into James's. The question had been on her mind for weeks, and now seemed like the perfect moment to ask it. "Do you ever regret missing that flight?" she asked quietly, watching a plane disappear into the evening sky. James smiled, thinking of Tom's proud face at the art exhibition, Lucy's flower garden that now bloomed in both paint and reality thanks to seed donations from the community, and the dozens of other children whose lives they had touched. He thought about the deep contentment he felt every morning when he woke up knowing his work mattered, about the love he had found with Emma that was built on shared purpose rather than mere attraction. "Never," he said, squeezing her hand gently. "Missing that flight helped us find exactly where we belonged. Everything we thought we wanted was actually just leading us to what we really needed." Their story had become a testament to the truth that sometimes life's greatest disappointments are actually hidden blessings, and that the most important journeys are not always the ones we plan, but the ones that lead us home to ourselves and to the people who need us most. The end.